Thank you, Hina. Today we are honored to have Ambassador Jennifer Haverkamp. She is Director of Graham Sustainability Institute at the University of Michigan. Is a veteran of 7 United Nations climate summits. If anything happens in a summit, she knows it. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
My pleasure.
Ambassador, please share with us what is this new report by IPCC says?
The new report is the clearest message that climate change is unequivocally caused by human behavior. This is something that people have known for a long time, but what this report says is that it is absolutely clear, and also it's notable in that 195 countries, governments, have agreed with this conclusion.
But these countries have not met yet, right? They are supposed to meet in November about this report.
That's right. The countries meet every year to implement the United Nations Convention on Climate Change and to negotiate new agreements. The one in Glasgow, Scotland, this November is especially important because it's when countries come forward with more ambitious targets for themselves than what they first agreed to back in Paris in 2015. And this report is timed to inform those conversations. And it is very much the hope that countries will read this, they will see it as a huge wake-up call, and bring much more ambition to the table.
Ambassador, the report refers to data which is of 2020. While this summer we are aware of a whole lot of fires burning almost in all continents, including Siberia, and floods, which people are calling 1,000-year floods in China and 100-year flood in Germany. So why the report does not refer to the current data and instead of relies on the older data?
I'm not sure, but my guess would be that these reports take a long time to develop. They're based on 14,000 different scientific studies that have been reviewed, assessed, summarized, and approved. And it may just be that the latest information was too late to get into this particular report. But the extreme events that we've seen this summer, as bad as they are, they're of a pattern that we've been seeing over the last couple decades.
Ambassador, you have been to 7 such summits. Are there everybody on the same page, or there is a live adversarial communication which takes place in these summits as well?
These climate summits are always challenging because every country comes to it with their own national interest in mind, and they come at very different levels of economic development, different perceptions of what their own role is in solving the problem going forwards. There are often disagreements around how much support should be given to developing countries for adapting to the consequences of climate change. But what you really see with this report, and also, frankly, with the Paris Agreement in 2015, is countries finally came together and said, we all need to work together and do our part to solve this. And under the Paris Agreement, each country makes its own commitment for what it will do toward addressing the problem.
What is your assessment? Are people keeping up with those commitments?
It's a mixed bag. I should start by saying the commitments from 2015 were not themselves ambitious enough. And that's one reason this report was designed, this agreement was designed for every 5 years for those to be evaluated and strengthened. And that's what's happening in Glasgow this year, is the first evaluation of those commitments. It's also true that some of the countries have not made the progress that they should have on that. And so these events and the lead up to these events are also kind of a chance for countries to encourage each other, to hold each other accountable. There's also very much, to a certain extent, how fast they can make the changes that this report says we absolutely need to make is dependent somewhat on the development of policies and new technologies across the globe.
You seems to agree with Greta Thunberg, who tweeted that there is nothing new in this report which we already did not know. Then why there was a need for another report?
I think what's needed here is the recognition that the governments are supporting this report's results, that scientists from all over are agreeing on these conclusions. And the other thing that you see is this is the sixth in a series of these reports that have come out for the last couple decades. And each time they come forward with greater certainty. They might have started with saying likely connection between human activity and climate change, and more likely, very likely. And this time it's unequivocal. And that should really silence the doubters that are out there.
Well, silencing the doubter may involve politics. Why do you think a issue which scientists are talking about has become a political football?
I think that part of the issue is that there has been uncertainty around how to address the problem and what the solutions to the problem would be, which creates reluctance to make commitments. What you've seen over the last several years is really wonderful increases in technology and the lowering of the cost of renewable energy so that there is clear pathways for countries to see ways to reduce their emissions.
Cost is the issue, most likely for the developing countries which are at a lower stage of development or changing their economy from traditional means to the modern means. Do you think those countries will be as enthusiastic in terms of support from the civil society to implement some of the recommendations?
What I think was a real breakthrough in the Paris Agreement was recognizing that each country should be able to set its own commitment for what it felt it was capable of taking on. And so developing countries, every country has great latitude in what their own commitment would be. And there are built-in mechanisms for helping countries to meet the obligations that they choose to take on. It's also the case that there's also been much more work done on the cost of inaction of climate change. And you see this already in the huge costs that we're suffering from hurricane damage or the forest fire damage. And it's increasingly clear that whatever cost it might take to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, it's way less than the cost that we'll be facing if we don't take action.
Senator Ed Markey tweeted, if senators truly followed the science in the IPCC report, we would have 100 votes for the climate change. Of course, he wished he had 100 votes. Do you think with this report, which you said gradually have asserted itself, that this is it, it is not likely, it's not most likely, but this is the situation, do you think it will have a bigger impact in the processes in our Congress?
I can hope. I think that we have, unfortunately, a history of some members of Congress not paying attention to the science, even when it's been very clear, like this has been for a long time. But I think the other thing that's happening, and what gives me more hope, is that reports like this are being noticed by the public. And there's increasing public opinion in support of action on climate change, increasing pressure on these members of Congress. And there's more and more signs of efforts to find bipartisan solutions to address the problem. It's not as much as we need, and it's not happening as fast as we need, but it's starting to go in the right direction.
You mentioned the word term bipartisan support. Is scientific community doing anything to enhance the bipartisanship on the issue? Because it got stuck in partisanship for a long period of time. Al Gore being a champion, he being a Democrat. There was reluctance on the other side, although I heard President Bush has been chopping wood and doing some of the things in his house which are climate supportive of the climate consideration. What scientists can do to liberate it further from being a bipartisan to making it a bipartisan issue?
Frankly, I don't think it's the responsibility of the scientists at this point. They have done their job. They have done their research. They have presented their conclusions. And it's now up to the voters. It's up to companies. It's up to influencers and decision makers to take that up and move forward and persuade each other. And frankly, politicians are responsive to their voters. And so people who read this report need to make clear that they expect more of their elected officials.
Do you think civil society and civilians, individuals are more enthusiastic to make changes than our government?
It's a question too of when you say our government, which part of government you're talking about. The new Biden administration has committed to a whole of government approach to addressing climate change across every agency, and they're seeking ambitious legislation, they're writing regulations, and you see across many states, many localities, serious action being taken on climate change. So it's really not a one or the other, yes or no. I think there are a lot of government officials across the country who are very seized with doing something on this issue. Not all of them, but a lot of them.
Mr. Haverkamp, tell us, if you're in Senate, I don't know whether it's a good wish or a bad wish for a person of your stature, what changes would you like to see happening in this Congress?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would like to see the Congress to provide the kind of funding that's needed for research in climate and clean energy technology. I would like them to go forward with an infrastructure package that also puts significant resources into public transportation, that puts things into reforming our electricity grid so that renewable energy, where it's produced, can reach the population centers that need it. I would like to see Congress in some form put a price on carbon so that we get the right price signals across the entire use of carbon, fossil fuels, just what the real costs are so that people have the right incentives to use less, and where it's cost effective to switch to renewable energy. And one other thing that I really, really think needs to be done, and this IPCC report really highlights for me, is if we're going to have a chance of avoiding some of the worst effects, what we really need to focus on in the near term is methane. The emissions that are released from oil and gas production, from leaks, that come from agriculture, that come from waste disposal, landfills. Methane is an incredibly potent greenhouse gas. It's 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide, and it's one of the easiest, fastest ways that we can make a big difference in the emissions. And a lot of the ways to reduce methane are actually going to pay for themselves because it means the companies can capture the methane and sell it.
Individuals, citizens, they have been recycling forever, and our kids are ahead of the older generation. What people can do, because it's still, if they want to have solar energy for their house or something, it looks like a very costly option.
And I think for a lot of people, they can again try to create political pressure so that the regulators push the utilities to move themselves faster to more and more renewable energy in their mix. I think the other thing that people can do is their utilities will come and do a energy audit of their homes, and so people can find how much energy they're unintentionally wasting. Other things that people can do is, when you're traveling, think hard before you fly if it's a short distance, because flights are very energy intensive, and there's not an easy way to reduce that. You can take public transportation or walk more around your home. You can think about reducing the kinds of food that you eat that are high energy. There are a lot of individual activities that people can do that add up to make a difference. But I also want to say that one of the most important things they can do is send the signals to their governments and to the companies they purchase from that they care and they expect low carbon, sustainable activity on their part.
Well, thank you so much, Ambassador Haverkamp. You have been helpful. Are you planning to attend the Glasgow summit?
I'm not sure yet. It's since I'm no longer with the U.S. government, I don't have an official role, and they're fascinating circuses of people from all over the world who come together, all of whom care about doing something on climate change. So it's a great thing to do, but on the other hand, I don't want to get in the way of the real important work that has to be done.
Thank you so much. Truly appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. I enjoyed it.
Back to you, Hannah.